Chapter 1. The Scent of Danger. Hey star-crossed souls. Ready to risk everything for a love no law can allow. The silver moonlight carved through the ancient oak trees of the shadow pine forest, casting ethereal shadows that danced like spirits across the forest floor. Seraphina cross-pressed her back against the rough bark of a centuries-old tree, her heart hammering against her ribs as she listened for the telltale sounds of pursuit. The Bloodmoon pack's territory stretched for miles in every direction, and she, a member of the rival Silvercrest pack, had just committed an act of war by crossing the sacred boundary. But she hadn't had a choice. Her younger brother's life hung in the balance, and the rare moonflower that could save him from the silver poisoning only bloomed here, in the heart of enemy lands. The delicate white petals seemed to glow with their own inner light as she clutched the precious bloom to her chest, praying to the moon goddess that she could make it back across the border undetected. A twig snapped behind her. Seraphina's wolf stirred beneath her skin, every instinct screaming danger as she caught a scent that made her knees nearly buckle. Masculine.
Wild.
Intoxicating. And unmistakably Bloodmoon. You're trespassing. The voice rolled through the darkness like thunder, deep and commanding with an edge that promised both protection and peril. Seraphina turned slowly, knowing she was caught, but refusing to cower. Her emerald eyes met the most stunning pair of golden orbs she'd ever seen. The man who stepped from the shadows was built like a warrior god, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, corded muscles visible beneath the simple black t-shirt that clung to his frame. Dark hair fell across his forehead in waves that caught the moonlight, and when he moved, it was with the predatory grace of an apex predator. But it was his scent that undid her completely, pine and leather, and something uniquely him that made her wolf whimper with longing. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thundering of her pulse. His nostrils flared as he caught her scent in return, and she watched in fascination as his pupils dilated. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with an electricity that had nothing to do with the approaching storm and everything to do with the magnetic pull drawing them together. Kai Bloodmoon. His name fell from his lips like a prayer, though she hadn't asked. Alpha heir to the most feared pack in the Northern Territories. Enemy. Forbidden. Seraphina. She couldn't bring herself to say her surname, as if speaking it aloud would shatter whatever spell had fallen over them. He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "That flower could get you killed. My father's sentries shoot first and ask questions later when they find Silvercrest wolves on our land." "I know," she repeated, lifting her chin defiantly even as her hands trembled. "My brother's dying. The silver poisoning is spreading too fast for our healers to combat without moonflower extract." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps even admiration. "You risked your life for family, wouldn't you?" A ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. In a heartbeat. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Here was a man who understood sacrifice, who valued loyalty above his own safety. Her wolf preened at the recognition, even as her rational mind screamed warnings. "You need to leave," he said, but he didn't step back. If anything, he seemed to lean closer, as if drawn by the same invisible force that made her want to close the distance between them. "The Border Patrol will be here within the hour." "I know." The words had become her mantra, a desperate acknowledgement of all the rules she was breaking simply by standing here, by drinking in the sight of him, by letting her traitorous heart race at his proximity. Seraphina. The way he said her name was like a caress, rough velvet that made heat pool low in her belly. "Why do I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for you to trespass on my land?" The question stole her breath because she felt it too, this inexplicable sense of recognition, of coming home to a place she'd never been. It was impossible. It was dangerous. It was everything their laws forbade. "Because some loves are meant to be hidden in the shadows," she whispered, the truth spilling from her lips before she could stop it. "But can they survive the light?" Thunder rumbled overhead, the first fat raindrops beginning to fall through the canopy above. But neither of them moved, caught in the gravitational pull of something that defied explanation. Seraphina knew she should run, should flee back to the safety of her own territory with the precious moonflower that could save her brother's life. Instead, she found herself memorizing every detail of Kai Bloodmoon's face, storing them away like treasures against the long, lonely nights ahead. Because deep in her bones, she knew this moment would haunt her forever. The night she met her mate in the heart of enemy territory, when loving him could start a war that would destroy them both. Chapter 2. Stolen Moments Under Starlight. 3 nights had passed since Seraphina's moonlit encounter with Kai Bloodmoon, and she hadn't been able to think of anything else. The moonflower had worked. Her brother Marcus was recovering, the silver poison finally purged from his system, but victory felt hollow when her every waking moment was consumed by golden eyes and the memory of a voice that had wrapped around her like silk. She shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be creeping through the shadows toward the border stone that marked the ancient treaty line between Silvercrest and Bloodmoon territories. But her paws carried her forward anyway, drawn by a pull she couldn't resist. Her wolf form moved silently through the underbrush, silver-gray fur blending seamlessly with the moonlit forest. The Whispering Falls had been neutral ground for over a century, a place where the 2 packs' territories met at the rushing cascade that tumbled down the cliff face. Legend said the moon goddess herself had blessed these waters, making them sacred to all shifters regardless of pack allegiance. It was the perfect place for a clandestine meeting if he came at all. Seraphina shifted back to human form behind a cluster of ferns, pulling on the simple dress she'd carried in her muzzle. Her heart hammered as she stepped into the small clearing beside the falls, mist from the cascading water creating an ethereal atmosphere that made everything feel dreamlike. "You came." She spun toward the familiar voice, her breath catching as Kai emerged from the tree line. He moved with that same predatory grace she remembered, but now she could see the tension in his shoulders, the conflict written across his handsome features. He'd changed from his pack leathers into dark jeans and a gray Henley that hugged his muscular frame, as if dressing down could somehow make their meeting less treasonous. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I tried. For 3 days I told myself this was madness." Walking across the clearing, before he melted back into the shadows as silently as he'd appeared, Seraphina stood alone beside the falls, her skin still tingling from his touch, her heart racing with a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She'd crossed a line tonight that could never be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. The howls sounded again, closer this time. With trembling hands, she shifted back to her wolf form and raced toward home, carrying with her the promise of tomorrow night and the terrifying knowledge that she was falling for a man whose love could destroy everything she'd ever known. As she slipped back into Silvercrest territory undetected, one thought echoed through her mind like a mantra. Some loves were worth any risk. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to find out if theirs was one of them. Behind her, the Whispering Falls continued their eternal dance, keeping the secrets of 2 lovers who dared to dream of a love that could bridge the chasm between enemy packs. But in the distance, other eyes watched from the darkness, eyes that had seen too much and would demand a price for their silence. The game of forbidden love had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than either Seraphina or Kai could possibly imagine. Chapter 3. Hearts in the Shadows. The abandoned hunting cabin sat like a forgotten secret among the towering pines of Raven's Ridge, its weathered logs silver in the moonlight. Seraphina approached cautiously, every sense on high alert as she scanned the surrounding forest for signs of danger. The structure had been built decades ago by humans who'd long since abandoned these wild lands to the shifters, leaving behind only this crumbling testament to their presence. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, torn between anticipation and anxiety. 24 hours had passed since their encounter at Whispering Falls, 24 hours of trying to convince herself that she was strong enough to walk away from whatever madness had taken hold of her heart. But here she was, drawn like a moth to flame despite every rational thought screaming that this path led only to destruction. The cabin door creaked open before she could knock, and Kai filled the doorway like a dark angel of temptation. He'd arrived first, she realized, noting the small fire crackling in the stone hearth behind him that cast dancing shadows across his sharp features. The golden light flickered across his bare chest. He'd shed his shirt, revealing the intricate tattoo that marked him as Bloodmoon royalty spiraling across his left shoulder and down his arm. "You came," he said softly, stepping aside to let her enter. The simple words carried so much weight, relief, gratitude, and something deeper that made her chest tighten with emotion. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She crossed the threshold, immediately enveloped by his intoxicating scent mixed with wood smoke and pine. The cabin was small, intimate, with little more than a stone fireplace, a few pieces of rough furniture, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. I hoped. His honesty was devastating. "But I also know how impossible this is for both of us. I wouldn't have blamed you for choosing duty over." He gestured helplessly between them. "Whatever this is." Seraphina turned to face him fully, her heart clenching at the vulnerability in his golden eyes. This powerful alpha heir, who commanded respect and fear from enemies across the territory, was laying his heart bare for her. The knowledge that she held such power over him was both thrilling and terrifying. "I try to stay away," she confessed, moving closer to the fire. The warmth felt good against her skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat that radiated from Kai's presence. "I told myself 100 different reasons why this was wrong, why we could never work. And yet you're here." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the whisper of his breath against her temple. "What changed your mind?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dancing flames as she searched for the right words. "My brother asked me why I looked so sad," she finally said. "Marcus is barely 16, but he's always been perceptive. He said I looked like someone who'd lost something precious." Kai's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with a rightness that stole her breath. "Had you lost something precious?" "I realized I had." She turned to meet his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'd lost hope. For so long, I've accepted that my life was predetermined, that I'd mate with whoever my father chose, bear children to strengthen our pack alliances, live and die for duty alone. But then I met you, and for the first time, I felt like I had a choice." Seraphina. Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I know we're from enemy packs. I know our fathers would see us both exiled, or worse if they discovered this. But I also know that what I feel for you is real." She stepped closer, eliminating the last of the distance between them. "My wolf has never responded to anyone the way she responds to you. When you're near, it's like coming home to a place I never knew I was searching for." Kai's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her cheekbone. "You're not the only one who feels that way. These past weeks, I've been going through the motions of my life while feeling completely empty inside. My father's been pressuring me to choose a mate from the eligible females in our pack, and the thought of binding myself to anyone else makes me physically ill." "Your father wants you to mate soon?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, jealousy flaring hot and bright in her chest. A bitter smile curved his lips. "Alpha Thane Bloodmoon doesn't believe in long engagements. He says I need to produce heirs quickly to secure our bloodline's future. There's a ceremony planned for the next full moon where I'm supposed to announce my choice. That's less than 2 weeks away." The words felt like shards of glass in her throat. "I know." His forehead came to rest against hers, and she could feel the tremor that ran through his powerful frame. "Sarah, I can't do it. I can't stand before my pack and claim another woman when my soul belongs to you." The pet name sent warmth cascading through her entire being. No one had ever called her Sarah before, but hearing it from his lips felt like a gift, something precious and intimate that belonged only to them. "Then don't," she whispered, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. "Run away with me. We could leave the territories, find somewhere the pack wars don't matter." "You know we can't." His voice was rough with longing. "They'd hunt us down. Both our packs would see us as traitors, and they'd never stop looking. We'd spend our lives running, always looking over our shoulders. Then what do we do? The question hung between them, heavy with desperation. Instead of answering, Kai's hands framed her face, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. Tonight, we forget about tomorrow. Tonight, we're just Kai and Sarah, two people who found each other against impossible odds. Before she could respond, his mouth was on hers, and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was everything their first meeting had promised and more, desperate, consuming, a melding of souls that transcended the physical. Her wolf howled with joy at the contact, recognizing her mate's touch with primitive satisfaction. Seraphina melted against him, her hands fisting in his dark hair as she kissed him back with equal fervor. He tasted like mint and danger, like promises whispered in the dark and secrets shared beneath starlight. When he groaned low in his throat, the sound vibrating against her lips, heat pooled liquid and urgent in her core. Sarah, he breathed against her mouth, her name a benediction that made her knees weak. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too fast, too dangerous. Never. The word escaped her on a gasp as he trailed burning kisses along her jaw, finding that sensitive spot just below her ear that made her arch against him. Don't you dare stop. His response was to lift her easily in his arms, carrying her to the narrow bed with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. He laid her down as if she were made of spun glass, his golden gaze never leaving her face as he searched for any sign of hesitation. Are you sure? He asked, his voice hoarse with restraint. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, no matter what the future holds. I've been yours since the moment I caught your scent in the forest, she admitted, reaching up to pull him down to her. Nothing else matters but this. But us. The confession seemed to shatter the last of his control. He claimed her mouth again, pouring all of his longing and desperation into the kiss as his hands mapped the curves of her body through her dress. Every touch sent lightning through her veins, every caress stoking the fire that threatened to consume them both. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's call echoed across the ridge. But inside their sanctuary, there was only the crackle of the fire, the whispered endearments between lovers, and the ancient dance of two souls finally finding their match. Hours later, as they lay entwined in the narrow bed, skin against skin and hearts beating in perfect synchronization, Seraphina traced lazy patterns across Kai's chest. The tattoo that marked his royal bloodline seemed to shimmer in the dying firelight, a reminder of all the obstacles that stood between them and any hope of a future together. What happens now? She whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet cabin. Kai's arms tightened around her, pulling her closer against his warmth. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know that I'll never let anyone hurt you. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to face, you're under my protection now. And you're under mine, she replied fiercely, lifting her head to meet his gaze. We're in this together, whatever comes next. He smiled then, the expression transforming his face from dangerously beautiful to something so tender it took her breath away. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. But even as they lost themselves in each other once more, neither noticed the shadow that passed by the cabin window or the golden eyes that watched from the tree line before disappearing back into the night. Their secret was no longer safe, and the reckoning that awaited them would test the very foundations of their newfound love. Chapter 4. Chains of Betrayal. The summons came at dawn, delivered by her father's most trusted sentinel in the form of a curt command. Your presence is required in the Alpha study. Immediately, Seraphina's blood turned to ice as she followed the stone-faced guard through the corridors of the Silvercrest pack house, her mind racing through a dozen possible explanations for the urgent meeting. Had someone seen her return from the ridge? Did they know about the cabin, about Kai, about the night that had changed everything? The massive oak doors to Alpha Darius Cross's study stood open, revealing her father seated behind his imposing desk with an expression that could have frozen hellfire. At 62, He was still a formidable presence, silver hair streaked with remnants of the midnight black it had once been, steel-gray eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of commanding presence that made lesser wolves instinctively bare their throats in submission. But it wasn't her father's intimidating presence that made her stumble to a halt in the doorway. It was the sight of the man standing beside his desk, watching her with eyes that held a mixture of smugness and barely contained lust. Victor Ironwood, the Silvercrest Pack's strongest enforcer, and her father's chosen successor should anything happen to her older brother Cameron. At 35, he was considered the most eligible bachelor in the pack, and the one man she'd spent years trying to avoid. Seraphina. Her father's voice cut through her shock like a blade. Close the door. We have important matters to discuss. Her hands trembled as she obeyed, the soft click of the latch sounding like a death knell. When she turned back to face them, Victor's cold smile made her skin crawl. Sit, Alpha Cross commanded, gesturing to the chair positioned directly across from his desk. She obeyed on unsteady legs, hyper-aware of Victor's predatory gaze tracking her every movement. Father, she began, fighting to keep her voice steady. What's this about? Your future. The Alpha leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers as he studied her with calculating eyes. More specifically, your mating. The bottom dropped out of her world. My, what? Don't play coy, daughter. You're 24 years old, well past the age when most pack females have chosen their mates. It's time you fulfilled your duty to strengthen our bloodline and secure our pack's future. But I assumed I had more time. The words came out weak, desperate. Victor stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across her chair. Your father has graciously agreed to my proposal for your hand, Seraphina. We'll be mated at the next full moon ceremony. What? The word exploded from her lips before she could stop it. Father, you can't be serious. I barely know him. You'll have plenty of time to get acquainted after the mating ceremony, Alpha Cross said coldly. Victor has proven his loyalty to this pack time and again. His bloodline is strong, his wolf is powerful, and his dedication to our people is unquestionable. You could do far worse. But what about love? The question slipped out before she could stop it, earning her a sharp look from her father. Love, he scoffed. Love is a luxury we cannot afford, Seraphina. This pack has enemies on all sides. The Bloodmoon pack to the north grows stronger every day under that bastard Thane's leadership. We need alliances, strong bloodlines, and warriors who will fight to protect our people. Victor can give you all of that. And I can give you pleasure beyond your wildest dreams, Victor added, his voice dropping to a husky whisper that made her stomach churn. I've been watching you for years, little wolf. Waiting for you to mature into the beauty you've become. You'll learn to appreciate what I can offer. The possessive hunger in his voice made bile rise in her throat. This wasn't a marriage proposal. It was a claiming, a transaction where she was nothing more than a commodity to be traded. I won't do it. The words came out stronger than she felt, but she lifted her chin defiantly anyway. You can't force me to mate with someone I don't want. Her father's eyes flashed dangerously. Can't I? You forget, daughter, that you live by my grace and under my protection. Everything you have, everything you are, exists because I allow it. I've been patient with your stubborn independence, but that patience has reached its end. Victor will make you a good mate, he continued, his tone turning almost conversational. He's agreed to let you maintain some of your freedoms as long as you fulfill your primary duties. Bearing his children, supporting his position within the pack hierarchy, presenting a united front to our enemies. How generous, she said through gritted teeth, sarcasm dripping from every word. Victor chuckled, the sound low and menacing. You have spirit, little wolf. I like that. It will make breaking you all the more satisfying. The casual cruelty in his words sent ice through her veins. This was her father's vision of her future, bound to a man who saw her as nothing more than a conquest to be claimed and controlled. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. Then you'll be stripped of your rank and cast out from the pack, Alpha Cross replied without hesitation. You'll become a rogue, Fair game for any pack that decides you're a threat. How long do you think you'd survive on your own, daughter? A week? A month? The threat hung in the air between them, as effective as any chain. Without pack protection, she would be vulnerable to everything from rival shifters to human hunters. Rogues rarely lived long, particularly females traveling alone. The ceremony will take place in 10 days, her father continued, as if her compliance was already assured. Victor's family will be arriving tomorrow to begin the traditional negotiations. You'll spend time with him, allow him to court you properly, and by the full moon, you'll stand before the pack and accept him as your mate. 10 days. The same timeline Kai had mentioned for his own forced mating ceremony. The cosmic irony would have been amusing if it wasn't so devastating. I need time to think, she said desperately. You have until tonight, Victor said, moving to stand directly in front of her chair. His scent, harsh and aggressive, made her wolf recoil in disgust. Tomorrow, I'll begin courting you in earnest. I suggest you adjust your attitude accordingly. He reached out as if to touch her face, and she jerked backward so violently that she nearly toppled the chair. His eyes darkened at the rejection, but he merely smiled that cold, predatory smile. Such fire, he murmured. I'll enjoy taming it. That's enough, Alpha Cross said sharply. Victor, give me a moment alone with my daughter. The enforcer nodded curtly, but not before letting his gaze rake over Seraphina's form one more time in a way that made her skin crawl. Until tomorrow, little wolf. The door closed behind him with ominous finality, leaving father and daughter alone in the suddenly oppressive study. Alpha Cross studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I know you think me cruel, he said finally. But everything I do to protect this pack. To protect you. By selling me to the highest bidder? The bitterness in her voice was impossible to hide. By ensuring your survival, he corrected. Victor is not a gentleman, I'll grant you that. But he's strong, and he'll keep you safe. In times like these, that's more important than fleeting emotions. Times like these, she echoed. Her father's expression grew grave. There are rumors, Seraphina. Reports of unusual activity along our borders. Some of our scouts believe the Bloodmoon pack is planning something, a major offensive that could threaten everything we've built here. The mention of Kai's pack sent panic racing through her system. What kind of offensive? We're not certain yet. But Alpha Thane has been consolidating his forces, calling in favors from allied packs. His son has been seen conducting reconnaissance missions near our territory. Her father's eyes narrowed. If war is coming, we need to be prepared. Strong alliances, unified leadership, and no weak points they can exploit. Seraphina's mind reeled. Was Kai involved in planning attacks against her pack? Had their meetings been nothing more than an elaborate deception designed to gather intelligence? No. She refused to believe it. The connection between them, the raw emotion in his eyes when he touched her, that couldn't have been faked. Could it? I can see the doubt in your eyes, her father said softly. You're wondering if you can trust anyone in times like these. The answer is simple. You can trust your pack. Your family. The bonds that have kept us safe for generations. And Victor? The name felt like poison on her tongue. Victor will die before he lets anyone harm you. Can you say the same about whatever romantic fantasies might be clouding your judgment? The question hit too close to home, and she had to fight to keep her expression neutral. If her father had any suspicion about Kai, about their forbidden meetings, I'll consider everything you've said, she managed to say, rising from her chair on unsteady legs. May I be excused? I need some air. Alpha Cross nodded slowly. Remember, Seraphina, duty before desire. It's a lesson that has served our pack well for centuries. Don't let misguided emotions destroy everything we've worked to build. She fled the study before her composure could crack completely, racing through the pack house and out into the morning sunlight. But even the fresh air couldn't dispel the suffocating weight of despair that pressed down on her chest. 10 days until she was forced to mate with Victor Ironwood. 10 days until her life became a living nightmare of submission and abuse at the hands of a man who saw her as nothing more than a prize to be claimed. And somewhere out there, Kai was facing his own impossible choice, preparing to announce his selection of a mate from among the eligible Bloodmoon females. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Both packs were rushing their heirs into strategic matings, preparing for a conflict that seemed inevitable. But what did that mean for the fragile bond she and Kai had forged? Could their love survive the coming storm, or would they be swept away by forces beyond their control? As she stumbled toward the forest edge, seeking the solitude she needed to think, one terrible truth echoed through her mind. Everything was falling apart, and she was powerless to stop it. The only question now was whether she'd fight for the love she'd found in the shadows, or surrender to the chains that duty demanded she wear. Chapter 5. Desperate Measures. Seraphina barely made it to the tree line before her composure shattered completely. She collapsed against the rough bark of an ancient pine, her body racked with silent sobs as the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. 10 days. In 10 days, she would be bound to Victor Ironwood for life, subjected to his cruelty and stripped of every dream she'd dared to harbor. The thought of his hands on her skin, of bearing his children while her heart belonged to another, made bile rise in her throat. She pressed her face against the tree, breathing in the clean scent of pine and earth as she fought for control. Sarah? The familiar voice made her spin around, hope and terror warring in her chest. Kai emerged from the deeper shadows of the forest, his golden eyes dark with concern as he took in her tear-stained face and trembling hands. "What are you doing here?" she gasped, quickly scanning the area for any sign they might be observed. "It's dangerous for you to be so close to the pack house. I had to see you." He moved closer, his powerful frame radiating tension. "Something's happened. My father, there's been a development." The gravity in his voice sent fresh waves of panic through her system. What kind of development? Instead of answering immediately, he reached for her, pulling her into his arms with desperate urgency. She melted against his chest, breathing in his intoxicating scent as if it could somehow anchor her to sanity. "Tell me," she whispered against his shirt. "The mating ceremony has been moved up," he said quietly. "It's happening tonight." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Tonight? But you said—" "I know what I said." His arms tightened around her, as if he could somehow hold back the tide of fate through sheer will. "My father received intelligence that suggests your pack is planning an offensive strike. He wants me mated and producing heirs as quickly as possible, in case—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "In case you don't survive the coming war," she completed numbly. "Sarah, I can't do it." The raw anguish in his voice broke her heart. "I can't stand before my pack and claim another woman when my soul belongs to you. But if I refuse, they'll strip you of your inheritance and cast you out." The same threat her father had made, the same impossible choice. "Kai, there's something I need to tell you." She pulled back to meet his gaze, her heart hammering as she prepared to deliver her own devastating news. But before she could speak, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Well, what do we have here?" Victor Ironwood stepped into view, flanked by two of his most loyal enforcers. The predatory smile on his face made Seraphina's blood turn to ice, but it was the gleam of triumph in his cold eyes that truly terrified her. "Victor." She stepped protectively in front of Kai, though she knew it was useless. "What are you doing here?" "Following my future mate, of course." His gaze shifted to Kai, taking in every detail of the Bloodmoon heir's appearance. "Though I must admit, I wasn't expecting to find her in such intimate company." Kai moved to Seraphina's side, his body coiled like a spring ready to strike. The air between the two men crackled with barely contained violence, alpha dominance meeting alpha dominance in a clash that made her wolf whimper with anxiety. "You're trespassing on Silvercrest territory," Victor continued conversationally. "That alone is grounds for execution under pack law." "I'm on neutral ground," Kai replied coldly. "Check your maps, enforcer. This section of forest belongs to neither pack." Victor's smile widened. "Technicalities. How diplomatic of you. Though I suppose diplomacy runs in your family, doesn't it? I hear your father is quite skilled at sending his son to gather intelligence from enemy packs." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Seraphina felt Kai stiffen beside her, his hands clenching into fists as Victor's implications sank in. "You think I'm using her," Kai said, his voice deadly quiet. "Aren't you?" Victor shrugged. "Beautiful Silvercrest female, daughter of our beta, perfectly positioned to provide valuable information about our defenses and battle plans. What red-blooded alpha heir wouldn't take advantage of such an opportunity?" "You're wrong," Seraphina said fiercely, but she could hear the uncertainty creeping into her own voice. The timing of their meeting, Kai's presence so close to her territory, her father's warnings about unusual Bloodmoon activity. "Am I?" Victor's laugh was cruel. "Tell me, little wolf, what did you discuss during your secret meetings? Did he ask about our patrol routes? Our weapon stores? The location of our safe houses?" "Stop it," she whispered, but the seeds of doubt Victor was planting were taking root despite her desperate attempts to reject them. "This is what you've been sneaking around to meet," Victor continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "A Bloodmoon spy who's been playing with your emotions to extract our secrets? Really, Seraphina, I credited you with more intelligence." "Sarah, don't listen to him." Kai reached for her, but she stepped back, confusion and pain warring in her chest. "You know what we have is real. You felt it the same as I did." "Did I?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "Or did you just make me believe I did?" The hurt that flashed across Kai's face was so genuine, so raw, that for a moment her doubts wavered. But then Victor was moving, positioning himself between them with the casual confidence of a man who held all the cards. "The evidence speaks for itself," he said smoothly. "Bloodmoon reconnaissance near our borders, their heir conveniently developing feelings for one of our females, intelligence about our defensive capabilities being leaked to their war council. It's actually quite brilliant if you think about it." "I would never betray my pack," Kai snarled, his control finally snapping. "And I would never use Sarah like that, wouldn't you?" Victor's eyebrows rose mockingly. "Then tell me, Prince, what did you learn during your pillow talk? What secrets did our innocent little beta's daughter whisper in your ear between kisses?" The crude implication made Seraphina's cheeks burn with shame and fury. But beneath those emotions, a terrible certainty was taking hold. Victor was right about one thing: the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. "Sarah, please." Kai's voice cracked with desperation. "Look at me. You know me. You know what we shared wasn't a lie." But when she looked at him now, all she could see were the golden eyes that had watched her so intently, the questions he'd asked about her pack, her family, her father's plans. Had every tender word been calculated? Every touch designed to lower her defenses? "I need you to leave," she said quietly, the words feeling like shards of glass in her throat. "I need you to leave and never come back. Sarah."
Now.
The word exploded from her with enough force to make both men step back. "Get out of here before I call for the patrol guards." Kai stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of devastation and disbelief. "If this is what you want," he said finally, his voice hollow. "But Sarah, when you realize the truth, when you understand what you're throwing away, remember that I loved you. Whatever else you believe, that was never a lie." He melted back into the shadows as silently as he'd appeared, leaving behind only the lingering scent of pine and heartbreak. Seraphina stood frozen for several heartbeats, fighting the overwhelming urge to call him back, to throw herself into his arms and damn the consequences. "You made the right choice," Victor said, his voice closer than she'd expected. She turned to find him standing directly behind her, his massive frame blocking her path back to the pack house. "Though I must admit, I'm impressed by your thoroughness in gathering intelligence from him." "What do you mean?" His smile was predatory. "Surely you don't think I'll waste such valuable information? Everything you learned during your intimate encounters with the Bloodmoon heir will be quite useful in planning our defensive strategies." The horrifying realization crashed over her like a cold wave. "You're going to use what happened between us in the war?" "Of course. Every detail you can remember, his pack's battle tactics, their weaknesses, their plans for the offensive. It will all prove invaluable when the fighting begins." "I won't do it." The words came out stronger than she felt. I won't betray. I won't help you hurt innocent people. Victor's expression darkened. You seem to be confused about your position, little wolf. You're my promised mate, which means your loyalties belong to me now. If I tell you to share what you learned, you'll share it. If I tell you to forget that Bloodmoon bastard ever existed, you'll forget him. And if I refuse, then I'll be forced to report your traitorous behavior to your father. His voice dropped to a whisper that raised every hair on her arms. How do you think Alpha Cross will react when he learns his daughter has been conducting secret meetings with enemy operatives? That she's compromised pack security for the sake of a doomed romance? The threat was clear. If she didn't cooperate, he would destroy not only her but potentially her entire family. Her father's reputation, her brother's future within the pack, everything she'd ever cared about would be forfeit. What do you want from me? She asked desperately. Everything, he replied simply. Your compliance, your cooperation, your complete submission to my will. In return, I'll protect your family from the consequences of your poor judgment. The trap closed around her with devastating finality. She was caught between impossible choices: betray the man she loved or watch her family suffer for her mistakes. And underneath it all, the terrible uncertainty remained. Had Kai truly loved her, or had Victor been right about his motives? I need time to think, she said weakly. You have until tonight, Victor replied, echoing her father's earlier ultimatum. The pre-mating ceremony begins at sunset. You'll stand beside me, smile prettily for the pack, and demonstrate your loyalty to your future mate. He turned to leave, but paused to deliver one final blow. Oh, and Seraphina? If you're thinking of running, don't. My men will be watching you every moment from now until our mating is complete. Any attempt to leave pack territory will be seen as an act of treason. With that, he vanished into the forest, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her dreams and the crushing weight of impossible choices. The web of manipulation and betrayal had tightened around her until she could barely breathe, and the worst part was not knowing who she could trust. As she stumbled back toward the pack house on unsteady legs, one thought echoed through her mind like a death knell. Tonight would mark the beginning of the end of everything she'd ever hoped for. The only question now was whether she'd find the strength to fight for her freedom or surrender to the chains that seemed determined to bind her. Behind her, hidden in the deep shadows of the pine forest, golden eyes watched her retreat with a mixture of heartbreak and growing determination. Kai Bloodmoon had heard every word of Victor's threats, and he had no intention of letting the woman he loved sacrifice herself for a war that should never have begun. The game was far from over. It was time to change the rules. Chapter 6: The Breaking Point. The pre-mating ceremony was a nightmare dressed in silk and tradition. Seraphina stood in her childhood bedroom, staring at her reflection in the antique mirror as her mother's hands worked to fasten the intricate silver clasps of the ceremonial dress. The gown had been passed down through generations of Silvercrest women, its midnight blue fabric shot through with threads that caught the lamplight like captured starlight. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a funeral shroud. You look radiant, darling, Elena cross-murmured, though her voice carried an undertone of uncertainty. Victor is a fortunate man. Seraphina met her mother's eyes in the mirror, searching for any sign that the woman who'd raised her understood the horror of what was happening. But Elena's expression remained carefully neutral, the perfect picture of pack loyalty and maternal duty. Mother, she began carefully, what if I told you I didn't want this? What if I said I'd found someone else, someone I truly cared about? Elena's hands stilled on the dress clasps. For a moment, hope flared in Seraphina's chest, until her mother spoke. I can see the realization dawning, Victor continued with satisfaction. You're starting to understand how thoroughly you were played. It's actually quite impressive, using the mate bond to gather intelligence. I might have tried the same tactic if I'd thought of it first. Stop it, she whispered, but he pressed on ruthlessly. The really masterful touch was making you believe he loved you. That kind of emotional manipulation takes real skill. I have to admire his technique, even as I despise his methods. Each word was like a dagger to her heart, because despite everything, Part of her still wanted to believe that what she'd shared with Kai had been real. But the evidence Victor presented was damning, and the alternative, that she'd been played for a fool by an enemy spy, seemed increasingly possible. "What do you want me to tell the War Council?" she asked finally, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Everything." Victor's smile was triumphant. Every conversation, every question he asked, every piece of information you might have revealed. Our people's lives depend on having accurate intelligence about Bloodmoon capabilities and intentions. The manipulation was masterful, she had to admit. By framing her cooperation as protecting innocent lives, Victor made refusal seem selfish and treasonous. But agreeing meant potentially sending Kai and his packmates to their deaths based on intimate conversations shared in stolen moments of passion. "And if I refuse? Then I'll be forced to report your treacherous behavior to the pack elders," he replied matter-of-factly. A daughter of the Beta conducting secret meetings with enemy operatives, compromising pack security for romantic delusions. Well, I'm sure you can imagine how that would be received. The trap was perfect and inescapable. Refuse, and watch her family suffer the consequences of her supposed betrayal. Agree, and become complicit in a war that could destroy the man she loved. "I need a moment," she said desperately. "Just let me process this." Victor checked his pocket watch. "You have exactly 30 minutes before the ceremony begins. I suggest you use that time wisely." He moved toward the door, then paused to deliver one final blow. "Oh, and Sarah? Don't even think about running. As I mentioned, my men are positioned throughout the territory. Any attempt to flee will be seen as an admission of guilt, and the consequences for your family will be severe." The door closed behind him, leaving Seraphina alone with her despair and impossible choices. She sank onto her childhood bed, the ceremonial dress pooling around her like a blue sea of regret. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, she would have to walk downstairs and stand before her pack as Victor's promised mate. She would have to smile and accept their congratulations while knowing that later tonight, he would claim her completely and irrevocably. And sometime before then, she would have to decide whether to betray the man she loved or watch her family pay the price for her defiance. The window drew her attention, moonlight streaming through the glass to illuminate the forest beyond. Somewhere out there, Kai was preparing for his own forced ceremony, selecting a mate he didn't want while believing that she had rejected him for their enemy's lies. The injustice of it all. Two lovers separated by manipulation and circumstance, forced into bonds that would destroy them both, was almost more than she could bear. Victor had played them perfectly, using their love as a weapon against them and ensuring that neither could find happiness. A soft tap at the window made her heart leap. She rushed to the glass, hope flaring in her chest, but it was only Marcus, her younger brother, perched on the oak tree that grew close to her room. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "I needed to talk to you," he said urgently, his young face tight with worry. "Away from the others. Sarah, you can't go through with this ceremony." "What are you talking about?" "Victor," he spat. "I've been watching him, listening to what he says when he thinks no one's paying attention. He's not a good man, Sarah. The things he's planning to do to you." Her brother's obvious distress made her chest tight with emotion. "Marcus, you don't understand. This isn't about what I want." "Then make it about what you want," he interrupted fiercely. "You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. You saved my life when you crossed into enemy territory for that moonflower. You've never backed down from a fight when something important was at stake. This is different. If I refuse Victor, the whole family will suffer." "Let us worry about ourselves," Marcus said with the stubborn conviction of youth. "Don't sacrifice your happiness for our sake. We'll find another way to deal with whatever consequences come." His words sparked something in her chest, a flicker of the defiance and strength she'd always prided herself on. Marcus was right. She had fought impossible odds before and won. Maybe it was time to stop letting others dictate her fate and start making her own choices. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "I overheard Victor talking to his men. They're planning something for tonight, after the ceremony. Something about finally eliminating the Bloodmoon threat permanently." Ice flooded her veins. "What kind of elimination?" I don't know the details, but it sounded like they're planning an assassination. During the chaos of war preparations, when everyone's distracted, the horrifying implications crashed over her. Victor wasn't just planning to use her intelligence for defensive purposes, he was orchestrating Kai's death. And she had been manipulated into providing the very information that would make it possible. I have to warn him, she said, already moving toward her closet to find practical clothes. Sarah, be careful. Victor has people watching. Then I'll have to be smarter than they are. She was already pulling off the ceremonial dress, her movements sharp with newfound determination. Marcus, can you create a distraction? Something to draw attention away from the main house. Her brother's grin was fierce. Leave it to me. How long do you need? Long enough to get to Bloodmoon territory and back. She pulled on dark pants and a fitted shirt, then grabbed her father's old hunting knife from its hiding place. If anyone asks, tell them I'm having pre-ceremony nerves and need privacy to prepare. What if Victor comes looking for you? Tell him. She paused, considering. Tell him I'm honoring the traditional purification ritual and I can't be disturbed until the ceremony begins. It was weak, but it might buy her the time she needed. As she prepared to climb out the window, Marcus caught her arm. Sarah, what if you're wrong? What if this Bloodmoon wolf really was using you? The question hit her like a physical blow because she still wasn't entirely certain of the answer. But as she thought about Kai's eyes when he'd held her, the raw emotion in his voice when he'd sworn he loved her, one truth became clear. Then I'll know for sure, she said finally. But I won't let him die based on lies and manipulation. Whatever the truth is, he deserves a chance to prove it. With that, she slipped through the window and into the night, racing against time to save the man who held her heart, even if that heart was destined to be broken. Behind her, the sounds of pre-ceremony preparations continued, unaware that the bride had fled into the darkness to prevent a war that could destroy everything she'd ever loved. Chapter 7. Racing Against Fate. The forest blurred past Seraphina as she ran in wolf form, her silver-gray paws eating up the miles between territories with desperate urgency. Every second that passed brought Victor's assassination plot closer to fruition, and the weight of that knowledge drove her forward despite the burning in her lungs and the ache in her limbs. She had perhaps an hour before her absence would be discovered, maybe less if Victor decided to check on his promised mate early. The thought of his rage when he found her gone sent a chill down her spine, but not as much as the image of Kai lying dead because she'd been too proud and too foolish to see through the lies. The border markers came into view, ancient stones carved with symbols that had warned away trespassers for centuries. Crossing them meant entering enemy territory where she could be killed on sight, but she didn't hesitate. Love had made her brave in ways she'd never imagined possible. The Bloodmoon pack house rose before her like a fortress carved from black stone and shadow. Unlike her family's more welcoming structure, this building was designed for war: high walls, narrow windows, and defensive positions that could withstand a siege. Torches blazed along the perimeter, and she could see guards stationed at regular intervals. Getting inside would be impossible through conventional means. But Seraphina had spent years studying the territorial maps her father kept in a study, and she knew something about the Bloodmoon stronghold that most outsiders didn't. There was a service tunnel that connected to the old wine cellars, a relic from the days when human merchants had still dared to trade with shifter packs. She circled to the eastern side of the compound, where a small creek ran beneath the outer wall. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a screen of hanging willows, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Her heart hammered as she shifted back to human form and squeezed through the narrow opening. The tunnel was dark, damp, and filled with the musty scent of disuse. She crawled forward on hands and knees, fighting claustrophobia as the stone walls seemed to press in around her. Somewhere above, she could hear the sounds of celebration, music, laughter, voices raised in toast. Kai's mating ceremony was already underway. The thought sent a spike of pain through her chest. While she'd been racing through the forest to save him, he'd been standing before his pack, choosing another woman to be his mate. The irony was almost too bitter to bear. The tunnel opened into what had once been a storage cellar, now filled with dusty wine racks and forgotten supplies. She climbed through the opening and paused to get her bearings. The celebrations were directly overhead. She could feel the vibration of dancing feet through the stone floor. Moving carefully, she found the narrow servant staircase that led to the main levels. Her father's maps had been accurate. This route would bring her to the corridor just outside the great hall where the ceremony would be taking place. As she climbed, fragments of conversation drifted down from above. Most advantageous match our pack has seen in decades. Luna Ashworth's bloodline will strengthen our war capabilities significantly. The heir finally fulfilling his duty to the pack. Luna Ashworth. So that was the woman Kai had chosen. Seraphina tried to ignore the jealousy that clawed at her chest. She had no right to that emotion, not when she'd sent him away believing the worst of his intentions. The servant's door opened onto an empty corridor lined with portraits of past Bloodmoon alphas. She could hear the ceremony clearly now, the ritual words being spoken, the pack's responses, the ancient songs that bound mates together for life. Do you, Kai Bloodmoon, heir to the Bloodmoon pack, take Luna Ashworth as your mate, to honor and protect for all the days of your life? Seraphina pressed herself against the wall, her heart shattering as she waited for his response. This was it, the moment when her last hope would die, when the man she loved would bind himself to another. But the expected "I do" never came. Instead, she heard Kai's voice, strong and clear. "I cannot." A collective gasp went up from the assembled pack members. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat as chaos erupted in the great hall. "What do you mean, you cannot?" The voice belonged to an older man, Alpha Thane, Kai's father. "I mean exactly what I said, father. I cannot take Luna Ashworth as my mate because my heart belongs to another." The admission sent shockwaves through the crowd. Seraphina closed her eyes, torn between hope and despair. He was refusing the mating, but at what cost? This is outrageous. Alpha Thane's voice shook with rage. You would defy pack law, abandon your duties, for some romantic fantasy? Not fantasy. Love. Kai's voice never wavered. True love, the kind the moon goddess intended when she created the mate bond. I felt it, father, and I cannot deny it by binding myself to another. Then you are no son of mine. The words fell like stones into silence. Guards, escort the former heir to the border. Let him find his precious love among the rogues and outcasts where he belongs. Father, please. You have made your choice, Kai. Now live with the consequences. Seraphina heard the sound of struggle, multiple sets of footsteps, and Kai's voice raised in protest. They were dragging him away, casting him out for refusing to betray his heart. The very thing she'd accused him of using against her, he'd chosen over his birthright and his family. She had to reach him before it was too late. Moving as quickly as she dared, she made her way through the corridor toward what she hoped was the main exit. If they were escorting him to the border, they'd likely use the front gates, the most public route to ensure his disgrace was witnessed by all. She found a window that overlooked the main courtyard just in time to see a group of guards emerging from the pack house with Kai held firmly between them. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held his head high despite his circumstances. But she also saw something else that made her blood freeze, additional figures moving through the shadows at the edge of the courtyard. Men who weren't part of the official escort, men whose movements spoke of deadly intent. Victor's assassins. They were going to kill Kai the moment he was outside pack protection, making it look like an attack by rogues or rival wolves. His exile would provide the perfect cover for murder. Seraphina didn't hesitate. She ran for the nearest exit, bursting through the doors just as the official escort reached the gates. The guards turned in surprise, hands moving to weapons as they registered the presence. Seraphina? Kai's voice was filled with shock and something that might have been hope. What are you doing here? Saving your life, she said breathlessly, her eyes scanning the shadows where she'd seen the assassins. Victor sent men to kill you. They're here, in the shadows, waiting for you to cross the border. The guards looked skeptical, but Kai's face went grim. How many? I saw at least 4, maybe more. She moved closer, desperate to make them understand. They're planning to make it look like a rogue attack. Use your exile as cover for murder. This could be a trap, one of the guards warned. Silvercrest spy trying to lure us into an ambush. Then why would I risk my own life to warn you? Seraphina demanded. I crossed enemy territory, infiltrated your stronghold, and revealed myself to save him. What possible strategic advantage could that serve? Before anyone could answer, an arrow whistled out of the darkness, embedding itself in the stone wall inches from Kai's head. The guards reacted instantly, drawing weapons and forming a protective circle. There, Seraphina pointed toward a cluster of buildings where she'd glimpsed movement. At least 3 archers in position. More arrows flew, forcing the group to take cover behind the stone pillars that flanked the gate. In the chaos, Kai managed to work his way to Seraphina's side. You came, he said softly, his golden eyes intense with emotion. Even after what happened today, you came to warn me. I couldn't let them kill you based on lies, she replied, her heart racing for more than just the danger. Kai, I need you to know, I don't believe what Victor said about you using me. I was scared and confused, but I know in my heart that what we shared was real. It was real. His hand found hers, squeezing gently despite the arrows flying around them. Everything between us was real, Sarah. I love you more than my pack, more than my birthright, more than my own life. And I love you. The admission felt like a weight lifting from her chest. I choose you, Kai. Whatever the consequences, whatever we have to face, I choose you. His smile was radiant, transforming his face despite their desperate circumstances. Then we face it together. A shout from the courtyard drew their attention. Reinforcements were arriving, both Bloodmoon warriors responding to the attack and additional figures in dark clothing who could only be more of Victor's assassins. What had started as a covert elimination was rapidly escalating into open warfare. We need to get out of here, one of the guards said urgently. This compound will be a battleground within minutes. Where can we go? Seraphina asked. Victor has people watching Silvercrest territory, and now Bloodmoon has cast Kai out. The neutral zones, Kai said decisively. The sacred groves where pack law holds no sway. If we can reach them, we'll have time to figure out our next move. It was a desperate plan, but it was their only option. Together, they broke from cover and ran toward the forest, arrows and shouts following them into the darkness. Behind them, the sounds of battle erupted as 2 forces clashed in the Bloodmoon courtyard. They ran hand in hand through the moonlit woods, 2 exiles united by love and hunted by the very people who should have protected them. The sacred groves were miles away, and their enemies would be in pursuit within minutes. But they were together now, and that gave Seraphina strength she'd never known she possessed. Whatever trials awaited them, they would face them as mates, as partners, as 2 hearts that had found their perfect match despite every force arrayed against them. The real battle for their future was just beginning, but for the first time since this nightmare started, Seraphina had hope. Love had already conquered duty and fear. Now it would have to prove strong enough to overcome war itself. Chapter 8. Sanctuary and Sacrifice. The sacred grove of the first moon stood exactly as legend described, a perfect circle of ancient oaks whose branches intertwined overhead like cathedral arches, their leaves whispering secrets in the night wind. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver streams, illuminating the moss-covered stones that marked the boundaries of this holy place, where no wolf could shed another's blood. Seraphina collapsed against one of the massive tree trunks, her chest heaving as she fought to catch her breath. They'd run for miles through treacherous terrain, their pursuers never far behind, following the sound of howls that echoed through the forest like a death song. We made it, Kai breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. Blood trickled from a shallow cut on his forehead where a branch had caught him during their desperate flight. They can't touch us here. Sacred law protects this ground. For how long? Seraphina asked, though she already knew the answer. The sacred groves were sanctuary, but they weren't home. They could stay here safely, but they couldn't live here forever. Long enough to plan our next move. Kai reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Long enough to figure out how we're going to build a life together. The word, together, sent warmth cascading through her despite their desperate circumstances. After everything they'd endured, the lies, the manipulation, the forced separations, they were finally free to choose each other. Kai, she said softly, what you did tonight, refusing the mating ceremony, you gave up everything for me. I gave up a life I didn't want for the only life that matters, he corrected, lifting her hand to press a kiss to her knuckles. My pack, my title, my birthright, none of it means anything without you. The raw honesty in his voice brought tears to her eyes. I'm so sorry I doubted you. Victor, he made everything sound so plausible, and I was scared. Don't. Kai's thumb traced across her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Victor is a master manipulator. He used our love against us, twisted it into something ugly. But what we have is stronger than his lies. Is it? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Look what our love has cost us. You're exiled from your pack, I've abandoned mine, and now both our families are probably at war because of us. Then we'll find a way to stop the war. His voice was quiet but determined. We'll prove that love is stronger than hate, that the bonds between hearts matter more than the boundaries between territories. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Multiple sets, moving with the careful precision of trained warriors. Their pursuers had found them, though sacred law would prevent any direct attack. Seraphina Cross. The voice that called her name was cold and familiar. Victor stepped into the grove's moonlight, flanked by 6 of his most loyal enforcers. His handsome face was twisted with rage, but he stopped at the boundary stones. Victor. She rose to her feet, Kai moving protectively beside her. I wondered when you'd catch up. Did you really think you could humiliate me in front of the entire pack and simply disappear? His voice was deadly quiet. You made me look like a fool, little wolf. That's not something I forgive easily. You made yourself look like a fool, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. The moment you decided to use lies and manipulation instead of earning what you wanted. Victor's laugh was harsh. Earning? You think love is something to be earned?
How naive.
Love is a weakness, a liability that makes people do stupid things. Like throwing away everything they've ever known for a doomed romance. If love is weakness, then what does that make you? Kai asked, his voice carrying the authority of a born alpha despite his exile. A man so threatened by genuine emotion that he has to resort to assassination and manipulation to get what he wants. I am a realist, Victor snarled. I understand that power is the only truth that matters. And right now, both your packs are mobilizing for war because their precious heirs chose treason over duty. The words hit like physical blows. Seraphina's heart clenched as she imagined the chaos their flight must have caused, her father's rage, her mother's heartbreak, her brother Marcus caught in the middle of a conflict he'd helped precipitate by encouraging her escape. The war was always coming, Kai said grimly. Our fathers have been looking for an excuse to settle old grievances. We just gave them one. A convenient excuse, perhaps. But this conflict will have real casualties. Victor's smile was cruel. Your brother Marcus, for instance. Such a promising young wolf. It would be tragic if something happened to him during the fighting. You bastard, Seraphina snarled, her wolf rising to the surface in response to the threat against her family. If you hurt him, you'll what? You're trapped in that grove, little wolf. Sacred ground protects you from direct attack, but it also prevents you from leaving to help anyone else. You can stay safe and watch your loved ones suffer, or you can come out and face the consequences of your choices. The trap was masterful in its simplicity. Victor had positioned himself perfectly. He couldn't harm them while they remained in sanctuary, but he could torture them with the knowledge that others were paying the price for their freedom. What do you want? Kai demanded. What I've always wanted, Victor replied. Seraphina returns with me to complete our mating bond. You disappear permanently. I don't care if you become a rogue or if you simply die quietly somewhere. But this fantasy of yours ends now. And if we refuse? Victor's grin was savage. Then the war continues, and everyone you both care about pays the price. Your families, your former packmates, innocent wolves who never asked to be caught in the crossfire of your selfishness. Seraphina felt the walls closing in around her. Once again, Victor was using their love as a weapon, forcing them to choose between their happiness and the safety of everyone they'd ever cared about. How do we know you'll keep your word? She asked desperately. How do we know you won't just kill Kai the moment I'm out of the grove? You don't, Victor admitted cheerfully. But you also don't have any other options. Stay here and watch the territories burn, or trust that I value my own reputation enough to honor my bargains. The silence stretched between them, heavy with impossible choices. Seraphina could feel Kai's tension, knew he was calculating odds and searching for alternatives that simply didn't exist. There has to be another way, she whispered. There is, said a new voice from the edge of the grove. Everyone turned as an elderly woman emerged from the shadows, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight and her pale blue eyes holding the weight of centuries. She wore simple robes that marked her as one of the grove keepers, the ancient guardians who maintain the sacred spaces. Elder Moonwhisper, Victor said with grudging respect. Even he wouldn't dare disrespect one of the most powerful spiritual leaders in the territories. Victor Ironwood, the old woman replied coolly. Still trying to claim what doesn't belong to you, I see. The girl was promised to me. Her father. Her father made a bargain without consulting the moon goddess, Elder Moonwhisper interrupted. And you, child of darkness, seek to bind a heart that has already chosen its mate. She stepped fully into the grove, moving with surprising grace for her apparent age. When she reached Seraphina and Kai, she studied them both with those ancient eyes. True mates, she said softly. I can see the bond that connects your souls, bright as starfire and strong as the mountains themselves. The goddess is chosen, and no mortal law can override her will. That's all very poetic, Victor said impatiently, but it doesn't change the political reality. Their union threatens the stability of both packs. Does it? Elder Moonwhisper smiled mysteriously. Or does it offer an opportunity for healing that hasn't existed in generations? She turned to address the small crowd that had gathered at the grove's edge. I invoke the right of sacred challenge, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the night air. Let any who would separate true mates face the judgment of the moon goddess herself. A collective gasp went up from the assembled wolves. The right of sacred challenge was ancient law, older even than pack territories. It called for a trial by combat in the sacred grove, with the goddess herself determining the victor. You can't be serious, Victor protested. That ritual hasn't been invoked in over a century. Then perhaps it's time, the elder replied serenely. Will you accept the challenge, Victor Ironwood? Will you risk the goddess's judgment to claim what you believe is yours? Victor's face cycled through a dozen emotions, rage, calculation, fear, and finally, arrogant confidence.
Fine.
I accept. But when I win, there will be no more delays, no more appeals to ancient laws. The girl becomes my mate, and this nonsense ends. And when you lose? Kai asked quietly. I won't lose, Victor snarled. The goddess favors the strong, and I am stronger than you, exile. Elder Moonwhisper raised her hands, and the grove suddenly fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as she spoke the ritual words that would bind them all to the challenge's outcome. By moon and star, by earth and stone, let the sacred challenge begin. 2 males will fight for the right to claim their chosen mate. The victor is blessed by the goddess. The defeated must accept her will. She turned to Seraphina, her eyes kind but serious. And you, child? Do you accept the terms of this challenge? Seraphina looked at Kai, seeing the determination in his golden eyes, the love that burned brighter than any flame. Then she looked at Victor, seeing only possessiveness. I accept, she said firmly. Let the moon goddess judge between love and possession. The circle was drawn, the terms were set, and as the moon reached its zenith above the sacred grove, two males prepared to fight for the right to claim their mate's heart. But only one understood that true love could never be claimed, only freely given. The battle for their future was about to begin. Chapter 9: Trial by Moonlight. The sacred circle blazed with silver fire as Elder Moonwhisper completed the ancient ritual markings, her gnarled fingers tracing symbols that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The assembled wolves pressed against the grove's boundaries, none daring to cross into the consecrated space where the moon goddess herself would bear witness to the challenge. Seraphina stood at the circle's edge, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Kai and Victor prepare for combat. Both men had stripped to the waist, their bodies marked with ritual paint that would help the goddess identify the righteous from the corrupt. But where Kai's marks seemed to shimmer with pure silver light, Victor's appeared dull and lifeless against his skin. "The terms are set," Elder Moonwhisper announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the grove. "This is not a battle to the death, but a trial of worthiness. The first to yield or be rendered unable to continue will be judged the lesser. The victor wins not just the right to claim his chosen mate, but the blessing of the moon goddess herself." Victor rolled his shoulders, muscles rippling with predatory confidence. "I've been training for combat since I was a child, exile. Your soft life as a pampered heir won't save you now." "We'll see," Kai replied quietly, but Seraphina could hear the steel beneath his calm tone. "I may have been raised as an heir, but I was also trained to protect what matters most to me. And nothing matters more than Sarah." The declaration sent warmth flooding through her chest even as terror clawed at her throat. Victor was larger, heavier, with the brutal experience of countless enforcement actions. Kai was fast and skilled, but he'd never been tested in true life-or-death combat. "Begin," Elder Moonwhisper commanded. Victor attacked immediately, launching himself across the circle with vicious intent. His claws extended as his wolf partially surfaced, a hybrid transformation that should have given him a devastating advantage. But Kai was already moving, flowing aside like water as Victor's strike whistled through empty air. The crowd gasped as Victor stumbled, caught off balance by his opponent's unexpected grace. Kai didn't press his advantage, instead circling carefully as he assessed his enemy's strengths and weaknesses. "Stop dancing around and fight me," Victor snarled, whirling to face him. "Or, are you too much of a coward to face me directly?" "I'm not the one who tried to murder an unarmed man," Kai replied evenly. "I'm not the one who uses poison and lies instead of honest combat." Victor's face twisted with rage. "Honest combat? There's nothing honest about love, exile. It's manipulation, pure and simple. The strong take what they want, and the weak make excuses about feelings and destiny." He lunged again, this time feinting left before striking right. His claws raked across Kai's ribs, drawing blood that gleamed black in the moonlight. But Kai used the momentum to spin away, his own claws finding their mark across Victor's shoulder. First blood to both fighters. The battle intensified as Victor abandoned any pretense of restraint. He fought like the brutal enforcer he was, dirty, vicious, using every trick he'd learned in years of crushing opposition. Kai gave ground steadily, deflecting the worst of the attacks, but unable to mount an effective offense against his opponent's relentless assault. "He's going to lose," someone whispered from the crowd. "Victor's too strong, too experienced." Seraphina wanted to scream denial, but the evidence was before her eyes. Kai was already bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts, while Victor showed only minor damage. Her heart broke a little more with each blow that landed, each grunt of pain that escaped Kai's lips. "Is this your champion?" Victor taunted between strikes. "This is what you chose over a real warrior. He can't even protect himself, let alone you." "At least he doesn't need to force women into submission," Seraphina shot back, earning a few chuckles from the crowd. "At least he understands the difference between love and ownership." Victor's attention flickered to her for just a moment, but a moment was all Kai needed. He surged forward, his fist connecting solidly with Victor's jaw and sending the larger man stumbling backward. "Never take your eyes off your opponent," Kai said grimly. "First lesson in combat. Now it was Victor's turn to give ground as Kai pressed his advantage. Where Victor fought with brute force and rage, Kai moved with fluid precision, each strike calculated for maximum effect. It was like watching a master craftsman at work, turning combat into something almost artistic. But artistry could only go so far against raw power and ruthless determination. Victor rallied, accepting a punishing blow to his ribs in order to get inside Kai's guard. His hands locked around his opponent's throat, and suddenly Kai was fighting for his life as Victor tried to strangle him into submission. "Yield," Victor growled, his grip tightening. "Yield and die quickly, or keep fighting and die slowly. Either way, she becomes mine." Kai's response was to drive his knee into Victor's solar plexus with enough force to crack ribs. Victor's grip loosened just enough for Kai to break free, gasping as precious air rushed back into his lungs. "Never," he rasped. "I'll die before I let you hurt her." "That can be arranged." Victor's next attack was pure desperation disguised as strategy. He partially shifted, his bones cracking as his wolf form tried to overlay his human shape. It was a painful, dangerous transformation that few wolves attempted in combat, but it gave him the claws and fangs of his wolf while maintaining the opposable thumbs and reasoning of his human mind. "Illegal transformation," someone called from the crowd. The challenge was to be fought in human form. But Elder Moonwhisper raised a hand for silence. "The moon goddess will judge what is permitted and what is not. Continue." Victor's hybrid form was terrifying, all the worst aspects of human cunning and wolf savagery combined into a single deadly package. His claws grew longer, his teeth sharper, his already impressive strength multiplied by the wolf's power. Kai tried to backpedal, but Victor was faster now, covering ground with inhuman speed. Claws raked down Kai's chest, opening wounds that would scar if he survived. Blood flowed freely, dark against his pale skin. Seraphina couldn't watch anymore. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene, to throw herself between Victor and the man she loved. But sacred law bound her to silence, forced her to watch helplessly as her mate fought for their future. "This ends now," Victor snarled, raising claws that gleamed like silver knives in the moonlight. "Die knowing that I'll make her forget you ever existed." But as he prepared to deliver the killing blow, something extraordinary happened. The ritual markings on Kai's skin suddenly blazed with brilliant silver light, so bright that several wolves cried out and shielded their eyes. The light seemed to flow from the marks into Kai himself, and when it faded, he was transformed. Not into his wolf form, into something else entirely. His human shape remained, but silver fire danced along his skin like living tattoos. His eyes blazed with inner light, and when he moved, it was with inhuman grace and power. "Goddess touched," Elder Moonwhisper whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The moon goddess has blessed him with her power." Victor's hybrid form suddenly seemed clumsy and grotesque compared to Kai's divine transformation. When he struck, Kai flowed away from the attack like liquid moonlight, his own strike landing with force that sent Victor flying across the circle. "Impossible," Victor gasped, struggling to his feet. "I am the stronger warrior. I deserve to win." "Strength without honor is nothing," Kai replied, his voice carrying harmonics that made the very air sing. "Power without love is emptiness." "You've never understood that, Victor. You've never understood that true strength comes from what you're willing to sacrifice for others, not what you're willing to take from them." The next exchange lasted only seconds. Victor, desperate now, threw everything into one final assault, all his strength, all his cunning, all his rage focused into a single killing strike. But Kai was no longer entirely human. He moved like starlight given form, deflecting Victor's attack and responding with surgical precision. His blow caught Victor directly over the heart, not hard enough to kill, but with enough force to stop the larger man's heart for several crucial seconds. Victor collapsed, his hybrid form dissolving as unconsciousness claimed him. The grove fell silent, except for the sound of Kai's labored breathing. The silver fire was already fading from his skin, leaving him human once more but changed in some fundamental way. He swayed on his feet, the divine blessing having taken its toll on his mortal form. "The challenge is decided," Elder Moonwhisper announced. "The moon goddess has spoken through her chosen champion. Victor Ironwood is judged unworthy, his claim forfeit. Kai Bloodmoon is blessed in his love, free to claim his chosen mate." Seraphina didn't wait for permission. She rushed into the circle, catching Kai as his knees buckled. He was burning with fever, his skin slick with sweat as the aftereffects of the divine blessing coursed through his system. "I'm here," she whispered, cradling his head against her chest. "You did it. You won." "We won," he corrected weakly, his golden eyes still holding traces of silver fire. "We won the right to love each other freely." Around them, the assembled wolves began to disperse, some bearing Victor's unconscious form away from the sacred grove. But many remained, watching with something like wonder as the lovers held each other in the circle where the moon goddess had declared their union blessed. "What happens now?" Seraphina asked Elder Moonwhisper, who approached them with a gentle smile. "Now, child, you learn whether love truly can conquer the hatred that has divided your people for so long. The goddess has blessed your union, but the real test begins when you try to heal the wounds your families have inflicted on each other." It was a daunting prospect, but as Seraphina looked into Kai's eyes, still glowing faintly with divine light, she felt hope kindle in her chest. They had survived lies and manipulation, exile and combat, the wrath of their families and the judgment of the divine. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And sometimes that was enough to change the world. Chapter 10: Bridges of Silver and Shadow. Dawn broke over the sacred grove like a benediction, painting the ancient oaks in shades of gold and rose. Seraphina had spent the night keeping vigil over Kai as the divine blessing slowly faded from his system, leaving him weak but whole. The silver fire that had blazed in his veins was gone, but something essential had changed. She could feel it in the way the very air seemed lighter around him, in the peace that radiated from his sleeping form. "He'll carry a trace of her blessing for the rest of his life," Elder Moonwhisper said softly, approaching with a cup of steaming tea that smelled of healing herbs. "The moon goddess doesn't bestow her favor lightly, child. What happened last night will be remembered for generations." "Will it be enough?" Seraphina accepted the tea gratefully, her throat raw from hours of whispered prayers and worried vigils. "The challenge is over, but our packs are still on the brink of war. Our families still see us as traitors." "Change rarely happens overnight," the elder replied, settling onto the moss-covered ground beside them. "But sometimes, a single act of courage plants seeds that grow into something beautiful." As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the forest. Seraphina tensed, instinctively moving to shield Kai's still recovering form, but Elder Moonwhisper placed a calming hand on her arm. "Peace, child. These come in parley, not war." Two riders emerged from the tree line, one bearing the silver and blue banner of Silvercrest, the other the black and crimson of Bloodmoon. Seraphina's heart clenched as she recognized her father's imposing figure on the first horse, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. The second rider was Alpha Thane Bloodmoon, Kai's father, whose golden eyes were so much like his son's, but filled with a cold authority that made her wolf whimper. Both men dismounted at the grove's edge, neither crossing the sacred boundary without permission. The respect they showed for holy ground was encouraging, at least. "Daughter," Alpha Darius Cross said quietly, his steel-gray eyes taking in her disheveled appearance and the protective way she hovered over Kai's sleeping form. "We heard about the challenge, about Victor's defeat." The way he said it made it clear that news of the divine intervention had spread quickly through both territories. That could be good or very, very bad, depending on how their peoples interpreted what had happened. Elder Moonwhisper, Alpha Thane nodded respectfully to the ancient woman. "Is it true? Did the moon goddess truly manifest her will in this place?" "See for yourself," the elder replied, gesturing to the circle where the battle had taken place. The ritual markings still glowed faintly in the morning light, and the very air seemed to shimmer with residual divine energy. Your son was blessed in combat, his love judged worthy by she who guides us all. Alpha Thane's expression cycled through a dozen emotions: surprise, awe, and something that might have been pride. My son, he repeated softly. The son I disowned for following his heart instead of his duty. Perhaps, said a new voice from the forest, it's time to reconsider what duty truly means. Marcus Cross stepped into view, flanked by a young woman with the distinctive dark hair and golden eyes of the Bloodmoon bloodline. Both looked travel-worn but determined, and Seraphina's heart leaped at the sight of her brother safe and whole. Marcus. She started to rise, but Kai stirred at the sound of voices, his eyes fluttering open with confusion. Sarah? His voice was hoarse but strong. What's happening? I hear, my father? I'm here, son, Alpha Thane said, his voice carefully controlled. We need to talk. Kai struggled to sit up, accepting Seraphina's support as the world seemed to spin around him. The aftereffects of the divine blessing were still coursing through his system, leaving him weak. But, Father, he said simply, I'm surprised you came. I'm surprised by a great many things lately, Alpha Thane replied. Starting with the reports of divine intervention on behalf of a son I thought I'd raised to be practical above all else. Love isn't practical, Kai admitted, but it's real. More real than politics or territorial disputes or ancient grievances. So, I'm beginning to understand. Alpha Thane's gaze shifted to Marcus and his companion. Your young friend here has been quite persuasive in explaining the situation from a different perspective. The young woman stepped forward, and Seraphina could see the family resemblance clearly now. She had to be Kai's sister. I'm Luna Bloodmoon, she said with a warm smile. Kai's younger sister and, apparently, the voice of reason in our family. I've been speaking with Marcus here about the real causes of the conflict between our packs. Luna, Kai breathed, his face lighting up with joy. You came. Of course I came. Someone had to talk sense into Father before he did something truly stupid. She shot a fond but exasperated look at Alpha Thane. Did you really think I was going to let you exile my favorite brother over a love blessed by the moon goddess herself? Your favorite brother? Kai asked with a weak smile. My only brother, but the point stands. The gentle banter between siblings was a stark contrast to the tension that had dominated their lives for weeks. Seraphina felt tears prick her eyes at the sight of family bonds reasserting themselves despite everything that had happened. Marcus. Alpha Darius spoke for the first time since the young people had appeared. I thought I told you to remain at the pack house. You did, Marcus replied with the stubborn courage that ran in their bloodline. But I also knew that someone needed to find out the truth about what's really been driving this conflict. Victor's lies and manipulations go deeper than anyone realized, Father. Explain. It was Luna who answered, pulling a leather satchel from her saddle and removing a collection of documents. Victor Ironwood has been playing both sides for months, feeding false intelligence to create the conditions for war. He wanted the conflict because it would position him as essential to Silvercrest's survival and eliminate any rivals for power. She spread the papers on a flat stone within the grove, each document bearing Victor's distinctive handwriting. Seraphina's blood ran cold as she read the contents. Reports of Bloodmoon troop movements that were complete fabrications, intelligence about planned attacks that existed only in Victor's imagination, strategic assessments designed to make both packs see the other as an imminent threat. He's been orchestrating everything, she whispered. The fear, the paranoia, the rush to force strategic matings, it was all part of his plan. A plan that would have succeeded if two young people hadn't chosen love over expedience, Elder Moonwhisper observed. Your defiance exposed the lies he'd woven so carefully. Alpha Thane studied the documents with growing anger. This is treason of the highest order. Victor Ironwood has manipulated both our packs into preparing for a war that would have cost countless innocent lives. Where is he now? Alpha Darius asked grimly. Recovering from his defeat, Luna replied, but under heavy guard. When he wakes up, he'll face judgment from both pack councils for his crimes. The revelation shifted everything. Instead of star-crossed lovers whose union threatened pack stability, Seraphina and Kai suddenly found themselves vindicated. Their love had exposed a plot that could have destroyed both their peoples. "So, what happens now?" Seraphina asked, hardly daring to hope. The two alphas exchanged a long look, years of mistrust and carefully maintained hostility warring with the evidence before them and the divine blessing that had sanctified their children's union. "Now," Alpha Darius said finally, "we try to rebuild what Victor's lies almost destroyed, starting with admitting that we've been fools." "Speak for yourself," Alpha Thane replied, but there was no heat in it. "Though I suppose I owe my son an apology. And you, Seraphina Cross, for doubting the sincerity of your feelings for him." "We both owe them more than apologies," Alpha Darius admitted. "We owe them the chance to heal the wounds between our packs, if such a thing is possible." Elder Moonwhisper smiled mysteriously. "The moon goddess works in ways that often surprise us, great alphas. She chose to bless the union of your children for reasons beyond our understanding. Perhaps it's time to trust in her wisdom." Kai struggled to his feet, Seraphina rising to support him. Despite his weakness, his voice was strong when he spoke. "I propose an alliance," he said, his words carrying clearly through the grove. "Not the marriage of political convenience you both planned, but something real. A partnership built on truth instead of manipulation, on love instead of fear." "A Bloodmoon Silvercrest alliance hasn't existed in over a century," Alpha Thane pointed out. "The logistics alone would be worth working through," Alpha Darius finished, surprising everyone. "If it means preventing future wars like the one Victor tried to orchestrate. Then you'll consider it?" Seraphina asked, hope blooming in her chest. "We'll do more than consider it," her father replied. "We'll make it work. Because the alternative is too costly to contemplate." As the morning sun climbed higher above the sacred grove, two families began the delicate work of rebuilding trust that had been shattered by generations of conflict. It wouldn't be easy. There were still those in both packs who preferred the old hatreds to uncertain peace. But they had something now that they'd lacked before: hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to change the world. The love that had brought Seraphina and Kai together against impossible odds was already bearing fruit, creating bonds between former enemies and possibilities that had seemed unthinkable just days before. Their story was far from over, but for the first time since this all began, their ending looked like it might actually be happy. Chapter 11. Bonds Forged in Moonlight. 3 months had passed since the Sacred Challenge, and the territories were transforming in ways no one could have imagined. Where once there had been border patrols and defensive fortifications, now there were joint training exercises and shared resources. The alliance between Silvercrest and Bloodmoon was still fragile, still tested daily by generations of ingrained mistrust, but it was growing stronger with each passing week. Seraphina stood on the balcony of what had once been a neutral meeting hall and was now the headquarters of the Allied Territorial Council, watching as mixed patrols of silver and black wolves ran together through the valley below. The sight still amazed her: Silvercrest and Bloodmoon wolves working side by side, their ancient enmity slowly giving way to grudging respect and even friendship. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" Kai's arms came around her from behind, pulling her back against the warm, solid strength of his chest. 3 months of recovery had restored him to full health, though he still carried traces of the moon goddess's blessing in the silver flecks that now danced in his golden eyes. "It's everything we dreamed of," she murmured, leaning into his embrace. "Even more than we dare hope for." "Most of it," he agreed, his voice holding a note of anticipation that made her pulse quicken. "Though there's still one dream we haven't fulfilled yet." She turned in his arms, studying his face with growing excitement. "Kai, I know we've been waiting for things to stabilize, for the alliance to strengthen before we—" He took a deep breath, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "But I can't wait anymore, Sarah. I want you to be my mate in truth, not just in spirit." The words she'd been longing to hear for months sent warmth cascading through her entire being. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking you to marry me," he said simply. "To stand before both our packs and pledge yourself to me as I pledge myself to you. to make official what the moon goddess blessed in that grove 3 months ago. Tears of joy blurred her vision as she threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she breathed against his lips. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of applause from the doorway. They broke apart to find Marcus and Luna watching them with identical grins of satisfaction. About time, Luna said cheerfully. I was beginning to think you two were going to pine at each other forever. We weren't pining, Seraphina protested, though her flushed cheeks suggested otherwise. You were definitely pining, Marcus added with brotherly authority. It was getting embarrassing to watch. Kai laughed, the sound rich and warm. Well, now we can stop pining and start planning. Speaking of which. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Seraphina's breath catch. The ring inside was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a moonstone the size of her thumbnail surrounded by diamonds that seemed to capture and reflect light like trapped stars. But it was the band that truly took her breath away, silver and black metal intertwined in an intricate pattern that told the story of two bloodlines joining as one. It's perfect, she whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. The moment the ring settled into place, she felt something shift in the air around them, a recognition, a completion, as if the universe itself was acknowledging their bond. The moonstones were blessed by Elder Moonwhisper herself, Kai explained. She said they would help bind not just our hearts, but the alliance between our peoples. And the metal work? A collaboration between the finest craftsmen from both territories. Silver from Silvercrest mines, iron from Bloodmoon forges, shaped by hands working together for the first time in generations. The symbolism was perfect, and Seraphina felt fresh tears threaten as she studied the intricate design. This wasn't just an engagement ring. It was a work of art that represented everything they'd fought to build. So, Luna said practically, when's the wedding? Before either of them could answer, a commotion in the courtyard below drew their attention. A contingent of riders was approaching under a banner that made Seraphina's blood run cold, the gray and red of the Shadowfang Pack, one of the most aggressive territories in the northern ranges. What are they doing here? Marcus asked, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. I don't know, Kai replied grimly, but they're flying a parley flag. We have to hear them out. 20 minutes later, they were seated in the council chamber as Alpha Magnus Shadowfang made his case. He was a massive man even by werewolf standards, scarred from countless battles and radiating the kind of barely controlled violence that made lesser wolves instinctively submit. The Northern Territories are watching your little experiment with great interest, he said without preamble. This alliance of yours, this joining of ancient enemies, it has implications beyond your borders. What kind of implications? Alpha Darius asked carefully. Both he and Alpha Thane had arrived within an hour of the Shadowfang delegation, summoned by urgent messenger. The kind that make other packs nervous, Magnus replied bluntly. Combined, your territories control the richest hunting grounds and mining rights in the region. Your newfound cooperation makes you a threat to the established balance of power. We're not threatening anyone, Seraphina interjected. The alliance is defensive in nature. Magnus' laugh was harsh. Tell that to the packs who suddenly find themselves excluded from resources they once accessed through playing you against each other. Tell that to the leaders who built their power on the assumption that Silvercrest and Bloodmoon would remain eternal enemies. The implications were sobering. Their success in building peace had inadvertently created new tensions with neighboring territories who preferred the old system of divide and conquer. What do you propose? Alpha Thane asked. A test, Magnus said simply. Your alliance claims to be built on love and unity rather than political convenience. Prove it. Accept a formal challenge from a coalition of northern packs. What kind of challenge? Kai asked, though Seraphina suspected they all knew where this was heading. Combat trials. 3 contests, individual, paired, and pack level. Winners take control of disputed territories and trade routes. Losers. Well, let's just say the alliance would be viewed as a failed experiment. The room fell silent as the weight of the proposal sank in. They were being asked to stake everything they'd built on a series of combat trials against multiple enemy packs. And if we refuse? Alpha Darius asked. Then the coalition moves forward with more direct methods of expressing their displeasure. Magnus replied with a predatory smile. War, in other words, but a war where you'd face 5 packs instead of 1. It was masterfully done, Seraphina had to admit. Accept the challenge, and they risked losing everything in formal combat. Refuse, and they faced a war they couldn't possibly win. We need time to discuss this, Alpha Thane said. Of course. You have until the next full moon to decide, 2 weeks from today. The trials would take place at the Convergence Stones, neutral ground where all packs can witness the outcome. After the Shadowfang delegation departed, the council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some argued for accepting the challenge, believing their alliance was strong enough to prevail. Others counseled refusal, preferring to take their chances in a defensive war rather than risk everything on the outcome of 3 battles. There's another consideration, Elder Moonwhisper said quietly, her voice cutting through the debate like a blade. The moon goddess blessed your union for a purpose, children. Perhaps this challenge is part of that purpose. You think we're meant to accept? Seraphina asked. I think you're meant to choose with your hearts rather than your fears, the elder replied. Trust in the love that brought you this far. As the debate continued around them, Seraphina felt Kai's hand find hers under the table. His fingers traced the engagement ring he'd given her just hours before, and she saw her own determination reflected in his golden eyes. We accept, Kai said suddenly, his voice cutting through the arguments. The room fell silent. Son, Alpha Thane began, you can't make that decision alone. We accept, Seraphina echoed, rising to stand beside her fiancé. Our love started this alliance, and our love will see it through whatever comes next. The individual trial will be mine to fight, Kai continued. I won the right to claim my mate through divine blessing once. I can do it again. And I'll stand with him in the paired combat, Seraphina added. We're stronger together than apart. As for the pack-level trial, Kai looked around the room at the assembled leaders. That will require all of us working as one. Silvercrest and Bloodmoon truly united, not just allied. It was a bold declaration, one that would require unprecedented cooperation between former enemies. But as Seraphina looked around the room, she saw nods of agreement and expressions of determined resolve. Then it's decided, Alpha Darius said gravely. We accept the challenge. May the moon goddess help us all. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, they would face the greatest test their alliance had ever encountered. But they would face it together, bound by love and united by shared purpose. The real battle for their future was about to begin, but for the first time since Magnus Shadowfang had walked into their council chamber, Seraphina felt confident in their chances of victory. After all, they'd already proven that love could conquer hatred, that unity could triumph over division. Now they just had to prove it could triumph over overwhelming odds as well. Chapter 12. Love's Final Victory. The Convergence Stones stood like ancient sentinels beneath the full moon, their weathered surfaces carved with symbols from a time when all wolf packs had been united under a single banner. Tonight, representatives from 7 different territories had gathered to witness what could either be the birth of a new era or the destruction of everything Seraphina and Kai had fought to build. The Northern Coalition had come in force. Shadowfang, Ironwood, Stormclaw, Nighthowl, and Ravenmoon packs, their combined strength representing over 3,000 wolves. Against them stood the Silvercrest Bloodmoon Alliance, barely 800 strong but united by bonds that went deeper than politics or territory. Remember, Elder Moonwhisper said quietly as she applied the ritual markings to Seraphina's arms, this is not just about combat prowess. The trials test the strength of the bonds between mates, between allies, between hearts that have chosen to beat as one. Seraphina nodded, trying to calm the nervous energy that thrummed through her veins. Around them, the combined packs of their alliance made final preparations, weapons checked, strategies reviewed, prayers offered to the moon goddess for strength and wisdom. The first trial begins at moonrise, Kai said, approaching with Marcus and Luna at his side. His golden eyes held that familiar silver shimmer that marked him as goddess-blessed, but tonight it seemed brighter, more pronounced. Magnus has chosen their champion, Gareth Ironwood, Victor's cousin. The name sent a chill through Seraphina's heart. The Ironwood bloodline was known for producing massive, brutally effective warriors, and Gareth was rumored to be even more vicious than Victor had been. "He's trying to get into your head," Luna observed. "Making you face another Ironwood, playing on the memories of what Victor put you both through." "It won't work," Kai said firmly. "I'm not the same man who fought Victor 3 months ago. The blessing changed me, strengthened me in ways I'm only beginning to understand." He was right. Seraphina could see it in the way he moved, the confidence that radiated from his very bones. The divine blessing had left its mark on him permanently, making him something more than merely human or wolf. The horn sounded across the ancient amphitheater, calling all witnesses to the first trial. Seraphina kissed Kai softly, pouring all her love and faith into that single touch. "Bring him home," she whispered to whatever forces might be listening. "Bring my mate home safe." The individual combat trial was brutal from the first exchange. Gareth Ironwood fought exactly as his bloodline suggested, with overwhelming force and ruthless efficiency. He was larger than Victor had been, faster, more experienced in formal combat. But Kai had advantages his opponent couldn't match. Where Gareth relied on brute strength, Kai flowed like liquid moonlight. Where the Ironwood champion struck with rage, Kai moved with purpose. And when Gareth began to tire from his aggressive assault, Kai's divine blessing allowed him to fight on with inhuman endurance. The turning point came when Gareth, desperate to end the fight quickly, made the same mistake Victor had. He attempted an illegal partial transformation. But instead of gaining an advantage, he found himself facing an opponent whose connection to the divine made him effectively immune to such crude tactics. Kai's response was swift and decisive. A series of precise strikes that bypassed Gareth's defenses and left the larger man unconscious on the stone floor, defeated but alive. "First trial to the Alliance," the neutral arbiter announced, and the combined packs erupted in celebration. But there was no time to rest. The paired combat trial began immediately, and Seraphina found herself facing opponents who had clearly studied every detail of her and Kai's fighting styles. Senna Stormclaw and Roderick Nighthowl were veteran warriors, perfectly coordinated and utterly ruthless. They fought not as individuals, but as a single entity, each anticipating the other's moves with preternatural precision. For the first half of the battle, Seraphina and Kai were driven steadily back, unable to find an opening in their opponent's flawless defense. But then something extraordinary happened. The engagement ring on Seraphina's finger began to glow with soft silver light, and suddenly she could feel Kai's thoughts as clearly as her own. The connection flowed both ways, creating a bond deeper than anything she'd ever experienced. They moved as one being with two bodies, their strikes coordinated with impossible precision, their defenses seamless and unbreachable. The Northern champions never had a chance. Within minutes, they were overwhelmed by opponents who fought with a unity that transcended the merely physical, their defeat as complete as it was inevitable. Second trial to the Alliance. But the celebration was muted this time. Everyone knew the pack-level trial would be the true test, a mass combat where 50 champions from each side would battle until only one faction remained standing. The coalition strategy was obvious and brutal. Use their superior numbers to overwhelm the Alliance forces, breaking their unity through sheer attrition. They charged forward like a living avalanche, howling for blood and glory. But they had underestimated what 3 months of cooperation and trust had built between former enemies. The Silvercrest Bloodmoon warriors didn't just fight alongside each other, they fought as each other, silver and black wolves moving in perfect harmony, their different strengths complementing rather than conflicting. Seraphina found herself back-to-back with warriors she'd grown up thinking of as enemies, defending and being defended by wolves whose parents had fought her parents in generations past.
But none of that mattered now.
They were pack, they were family, and they would stand together or fall together. The battle raged for what felt like hours, champions falling on both sides as the ancient amphitheater rang with the clash of weapons and the sounds of transformation. But gradually, inevitably, the superior coordination and unity of the alliance began to tell. One by one, the coalition champions fell, their individual skill no match for opponents who had learned to trust each other completely. When the last northern warrior yielded, the stones fell silent except for the labored breathing of the victors. All trials to the alliance, the arbiter's voice echoed across the amphitheater. By ancient law and divine right, the Silvercrest Bloodmoon alliance is recognized as legitimate and blessed. The cheers that erupted from their combined packs were deafening, but Seraphina barely heard them. She was focused entirely on Kai as he swept her into his arms, spinning her around in a circle as joy and relief flooded through both of them. "We did it," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it." "We did it," he agreed, setting her down gently, but keeping his arms around her. "And now nothing can separate us ever again." The formal ceremonies that followed were a blur of congratulations and political negotiations as the defeated coalition grudgingly acknowledged the alliance's right to exist. Trade agreements were signed, territorial boundaries confirmed, and mutual non-aggression pacts established. But the moment that mattered most came as the moon reached its zenith above the ancient stones. Elder Moonwhisper stepped forward with a smile that seemed to hold starlight. "By law of combat and blessing of the goddess, I pronounce you united not just in heart but in deed," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the now peaceful amphitheater. "Kai Bloodmoon, Seraphina Cross, you have proven that love can indeed conquer all obstacles. Let no wolf, no pack, no power in these territories question the bond between you." She raised her hands to the moon above, and silver light cascaded down to envelop the lovers in radiance that was visible to every witness present. "I now pronounce you mated in the sight of the moon goddess and all her children. May your love strengthen not just yourselves, but all who stand with you." Their kiss was witnessed by hundreds of wolves from 7 different packs, a symbol of unity that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. But for Seraphina and Kai, there was only each other. 2 hearts that had found their perfect match and fought against impossible odds to claim their happy ending. As the celebration continued around them, as their peoples mingled and began to forge new friendships from old enmities, the newlywed mates slipped away to find a quiet moment together beneath the ancient stones. "So," Seraphina said softly, her head resting against Kai's shoulder as they watched their combined packs celebrate their victory, "what do you think comes next for the Alpha and Luna of the most unlikely alliance in territorial history?" Kai's arms tightened around her, his voice warm with contentment and anticipation. "Next, we build something beautiful together. A future where our children grow up knowing that love is stronger than hate, that unity is more powerful than division, that sometimes the most impossible dreams are the ones most worth fighting for." "I love you," she whispered, the words carrying all the weight of everything they'd endured and overcome. "And I love you," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Forever and always my mate, my heart, my home." Above them, the moon smiled down on 2 lovers who had dared to dream of a better world and had the courage to make that dream reality. Their story had begun with a chance encounter in forbidden territory, but it would be remembered as the love that united enemies and transformed an entire region. Some loves, after all, are powerful enough to change the world. Epilogue. 1 year later, the newest addition to the Alliance territories was a thriving trade city built at the confluence of 3 rivers, where wolves from dozens of different packs came to conduct business in an atmosphere of peace and mutual prosperity. The city bore no name from the old territories. Instead, it was called Moonhaven, a symbol of the new world that love had made possible. In the central square stood a monument to the Alliance. 2 wolves, one silver and one black, their forms intertwined beneath a carved moon. The inscription at its base told the story simply. "Here stands proof that love conquers all. May it inspire courage in every heart that reads these words." And in the palace that overlooked the thriving city, Alpha Chi and Luna Seraphina Bloodmoon Cross prepared to welcome the first child of their united bloodlines, a daughter who would inherit not just their love, but the peaceful world that love had created. Their forbidden love had become the foundation of a new age, and their happy ending was just the beginning of countless others that would follow in their footsteps. The moon goddess smiled, well pleased with the children who had trusted in love above all else. Some stories, after all, deserve to end with forever after.